Greetings to you. If you're a regular follower of these little videos, you'll know that we're partway through a series in John's Gospel. We finished chapter 5 last time. I did chapter 6 in a number of episodes a year or so ago, and that's still available somewhere in YouTube, and you can find it. And we're going to return to chapter 7 and do a series on John 7 to 12 in 4 weeks' time, if you follow these talks weekly. But for today and the next 3 weeks, we're looking at the Old Testament book of Ruth. Just a little interlude, but I hope an enjoyable and a worthwhile one. Ruth is a story often told, not always in quite the depth perhaps that it might be. But it's a lovely story, and of course it feeds in and has relevance to the forthcoming kingship of David, and of course to the ancestry of the Lord Jesus. But much more of that later. We begin with Ruth chapter 1, which is today's theme, and there's quite a lot there. A little bit of introduction. The key place is Bethlehem, a town in Judah. Judah, not a formal country, but Judah means the area of the tribe of Judah. When the Israelites conquered most of the Holy Land in the time of Joshua, the land was divided according to the tribes, and this particular area, a bit mountainous, some hill country, but going down towards the River Jordan, a steep hill from, we hear in Jesus' day, from Jerusalem to Jericho. That sort of area, and the hills around what's now Jerusalem were the area of Judah, a fair bit of the southern part of Israel. The big town, or big city, 5 miles from Bethlehem, wasn't called Jerusalem then. It was one of the very few parts that hadn't been conquered by the Israelites in the time of Joshua. It wasn't going to be conquered until the time of David, 100 and more years later. Jerusalem was then called Jebus. And if you're familiar with all the names of the different peoples in the Old Testament, the Jebusites lived there. And they were in a strong position, a walled city built on top of a little range of mountains, and pretty impregnable. In fact, impregnable to Joshua's armies and so on, impregnable until a rather clever, strategic, tactical soldier called David conquered it, and eventually it took over from Hebron, the city where Abraham had bought land to bury his wife, and where the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives and were all buried. Hebron, a bit south of Jebus, 20 miles south or so, had become the capital when David became king. But once he captured Jerusalem, Jebus, 7 years later, the capital was moved from Hebron to Jerusalem. But so Jebus is the big city. Bethlehem is one of the towns, sometimes called city, but just because it had walls around it, that was their distinction. Not ruled by Jebus, part of the tribal area of Judah, but these cities were pretty much self-contained. People lived within them, within the safety of walls, and the area around them was farmland. And Bethlehem was big on sheep, and it was big on barley and some other crops. They may have sold some of those sheep and barley and other crops to the people of Jebus. We don't know. There was no fighting between them. Jebus was too strong to be attacked and was pretty self-contained city and wasn't interested in conquering or taking over the lands around. In Bethlehem, there lives Elimelech. His name might mean, it does mean, my God the King, but names are names and it doesn't have to have significance. He's Elimelech, his wife is Naomi, and that has meaning too. Um, it's a nice name. It's a pleasant name. Um, we'll get to it. It might even mean pleasant, but it's a comfortable, warm name. And they have two sons, Mahlon and Kilion. Um, and there were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. Ephrathites is the clan part of the tribe of Judah. So they're very much what we would today call Jewish. They're the tribe of Judah. They live in Bethlehem, and within that, they're the clan of Elimelech. And these things mattered to those people very much. We do bits of ancestry, but we don't work in terms of tribes and clans as parts of tribes. At least we don't in Britain where I am, and by and large in Western Europe or the Western part of the world. But they did in those days and in those places. And there was a famine, and that can happen. Um, Unpleasant, no relief from international agencies or others. You look out for yourself. And Elimelech took his wife and his children across the River Jordan to the area of Moab, the country of Moab, which we would today uh, place on a map as part of the southern, not the southernmost, but the southern part of uh, the today's kingdom of Jordan. It's over the River Jordan. If you've got that geography in your head, or if you've ever been there, it's the part of Jordan that is on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. A little bit further north than that, but hardly, and a little bit further south than that too. But it's roughly equivalent to the part of Jordan on the other side of the Dead Sea. Remembering that in those days the sea was a bit bigger. Nowadays, the southern third of the Dead Sea, at least, is just salt flats where the sea has died even more. But equivalent to the Dead Sea and the salt flats to the south of it, other side of the river from uh, Israel or from the tribe of Judah, and you've got Moab. Moab hadn't been one of the helpful areas that the Israelites had gone through during their difficult years in the wilderness. Moab was one of the areas that they found themselves in. There's a fair bit of desert there. But the way it ended up was that Moab and Israel weren't the best of friends, and they weren't really on speaking terms officially. But of course, people crossed borders, and borders weren't policed in the same way as today. Cities had walls and that sort of border, but countries didn't. People would move around, particularly if they were hungry or if they were in danger, and that was accepted. They wouldn't get any help where they went. They'd have to make their own living. We don't know what Elimelech did, but he had to, when he went over to Moab, he would have to provide for his family. And his son's grown up at that point, or pretty nearly grown up, because before long they'll be marrying. and his wife may have had to work too in some ways just to provide for the family. We're left in the dark about that. But the two sons take Moabite wives. That sounds very old. Take a wife, very old-fashioned, but it's the language of those days. That wouldn't have mean there was non-willingness um, at all. No indication of that on the wife's part. But we would say they married Moabite women. Again, under strict rules, uh, not very legal or regular, but no one was enforcing those strict rules. There are two young men and there are Moabite young women, and perfectly natural for people to fall for each other and marry each other. And they marry these two women, Orpah and Ruth. And Elimelech dies, probably before the weddings of his sons. We can't be sure. And then when they've lived there for about 10 years, that is settled and married for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion die. So Naomi is left with herself and her two daughters-in-law, foreign daughters-in-law. Whether they could have stayed and provided for themselves, I don't know. But Naomi had heard that the famine in Judah was over and that there was food and so on plenty again in Bethlehem, as used to be the case. So she takes this opportunity to move back. Now, if her daughters had still been married to Moabite men, the assumption is they would have stayed in Moab very clearly, and she would have stayed with them as a mother-in-law, as part of the household. But there are no men in the picture anymore, and Naomi certainly has her ears to the ground. There's travel between the two countries across the Jordan, which isn't difficult to cross. And there's communication going on. From Bethlehem to the bits of Moab nearest to the river, it isn't terribly far, again, only 20, 30 miles. It's not too difficult. And she decides to go back. But she also decides to free her daughters-in-law from any sense of commitment to stay with her. There isn't any legal commitment to stay, but she thinks they'll be better off in their own country and they're still young enough to marry again. Moab is their country, their language, their religion, their people, their wider families. Makes sense for them to stay, and she encourages them to. But as we know in the story, I'm not reading the whole of Ruth chapter 1. It's quite long. You can read it. I encourage that. She kisses them and they weep, and it's a parting, but it seems a sensible parting. And at first they say, no, we'll stay. And she says, no, I, I can't, I'm too old to have any more sons. And you're not going to wait 20 years till they grow up to have yourself new husbands from me. Go back to your own people, and uh, you're young enough to marry again. Do that. And Orpah accepts that and kisses her mother-in-law goodbye. And it seems to be a loving and amicable parting, though inevitably sad. But Ruth clings to her, verse 14, a strong word there. And she says, go on, go back to your people. And then Ruth, this remarkable little saying in 16 and 17, do not press me to leave you, to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you. Love, commitment, total self-giving in commitment. I mean, she's not just offering to look after Naomi in her old age. She's offering to commit herself to Naomi totally. Where you go, I go. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Is this an act of personal conversion from the Moabite religion to Judaism? Or is this just total commitment to Naomi? Naomi's people are her people, Naomi's God is her God. We don't know. It sounds something like that. She will doubtless have got used to the Hebrew language instead of the Moabite language, a predecessor of what we now call Arabic. Um, she'll have got used to the Israelite language because it was the language of her husband and her parents-in-law, with whom probably, as would have been the custom then, she would have lived. She's got used to speaking Hebrew for 10 and more years, but and she will have seen that their religion, if they practiced it much, and they must have done if she talks about your God, she'll have seen some of the differences between the way they practice their religion. This is days before the temple, but still a religion of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their God, and Moses, and the laws given to the people, and the promise of the promised land, and so on. A lot of stuff there. The whole of the first 5 books of the Bible, sometimes called the books of Moses. She'll have got used to that, and she's, your people shall be my people, and your God my God. It's a total and lovely commitment. Um, you could say it's possible that in her heart she'd made that commitment when she married her Jewish husband. She had begun to think, right, I'm Jewish from now on. That's my identity. These are my people. And that happens sometimes with marriage, uh, cross-cultural or international marriages. It doesn't always happen that people simply adopt the new identity and culture and language and religion and so on. But Ruth does very strongly and quite delightfully and very, very powerfully. Where you go, I will go. Your people, my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there will I be buried. It's not even, look, Naomi, you're getting on. I'll come and live with you and look after you and honor you as your daughter-in-law. And if I find a husband, we will look out for you and look after you. As long as you live, I'm I'm there with you as a generation below, but I will be your provider. That no, where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Even after you've died, Naomi, I'll be faithful to you and to your people and to your God. I'm becoming, as of now, declared a member of the Jewish people and the Jewish religion and of your family. I'm no longer part of my family in Moab. I'm now part of, by marriage, part of the family of Elimelech, um, part of the tribe of Judah. That's who I am from now on, part of the clan of the Ephrathites. I'm going to be part of your people forever. After you die, I'll continue to be loyally part of your people. It's a very strong, powerful, lifelong commitment. And we're not quite used to those. I mean, in the Christian world and in many parts of the non-Christian world, marriage vows, promises, commitments are still made for life, but there's a sort of understanding that they can be dissolved, but they're only for life. But this commitment is not just for Naomi's life, and marriage is broken when one dies. In this commitment, even when you die, Naomi, I'll be faithful to you and to your family and to your people and your name and your line and so on. It's very remarkable. And Naomi saw she was determined and she said no more. Not much you can say to that, is there? So they went to Bethlehem, verse 19, and the whole town was stirred. It's not a big city, it's people know each other. Um, and we'll find that Naomi's late husband Elimelech has been a landowner on some land. He's had some property in Bethlehem. They're known. The whole town was stirred. The women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said, "Don't call me Naomi. That means pleasant or comfortable or even happy. Call me Mara, which means bitter, because the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. I've lost my husband, I've lost my two sons. I went away full, verse 21, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me? The Almighty has brought calamity upon me." She may not be thrilled and delighted to have Ruth with her, but she's still full of sadness at the loss of her husband and her two sons. And she's not, as we say nowadays, in a good place. But they returned, so Naomi returns with Ruth the Moabite. We're reminded of that. Ruth may think of herself as Jewish, a member of the tribe of Judah, a Hebrew, but she isn't. She's a Moabite, and whoever writes this, Samuel or whoever, is very careful to tell us that this is the case, that she is still a Moabite, a disliked nation, a nation which hadn't helped the people of Israel during their wilderness wanderings, but had hindered and blocked them in various ways and been difficult and not supported them. She returns with that label of a Moabite, and it's known she's a Moabite. And even if she spoke Hebrew, she would have had a Moabite accent. You wouldn't tell by facial appearance or body shape or anything that she was of a different people. But certainly by her accent and possibly some aspects of her clothing or jewelry or anything else, she was a Moabite and was known to be a Moabite. And they came back from the country of Moab to Bethlehem and arrive at the beginning of the barley harvest. So Bethlehem is a good area for farming a number of different crops, harvests at different times of year. Barley harvest, as we'll discover, is one of the earlier ones. There's a later harvest as well. The barley harvest will be followed by the wheat harvest. We discover at the end of chapter 2. In our terms, this is late spring, early summer, but the land is fertile and it's a bit warmer and sunnier than the land of Scotland, where I'm speaking to you from, and harvest time and good growing time goes much longer through the year. So they're back late spring, the very beginning of the barley harvest. And that's good because that suggests there will be food available. But that's where we leave chapter 1, we don't know more detail than that as yet. Plenty more detail to be had. And you probably know the story of Ruth, or at least in outline, and there's much more to be said and had. First chapter gives us the introduction. From Bethlehem to Moab in a time of harvest. Moab, not a friend, but not at war, but across the river, across the Dead Sea, a historic enemy of Israel. There is no big city in either place. Bethlehem is what we would call a small town. But after tragedy in Naomi's life and in Ruth's life, with her husband dying, they go back to Bethlehem because the famine is over. And we don't know what's going to face them, except that Ruth has a burning commitment to Naomi and Naomi's family. And Naomi has a deep sorrow and bitterness. And part of the culture of that land was that the wife bore children, of course, but she bore sons for the family, and the family was continued in their understanding through the male line. That, as in modern day Jewish culture, the wife was very often the homemaker and in charge in the home, and seriously in charge, and the husband and may well earn money and do things and be involved in making, in fabric work, in milling, in all sorts of things. The woman wasn't just a homemaker. She often had what we would call employment or business of her own. But part of her role in that society and in her own thinking was to have children, and especially sons, who would carry on the line and the name. And as we've seen, the tribe mattered, and within the tribe, the clan mattered. And this particular bit of the clan, the family of Elimelech, has been wiped out because the male line has stopped. And Naomi is bitter because of the sadness in her life, and also because her purpose in that sense, which is a very big sense in that culture and that time, her purpose is no more. She's no longer the matriarch, even with her husband dead. If she has sons and they have families, then it continues, the tribe continues. She's contributed to the future. But with her sons dead and no record, she has daughters. She hasn't contributed to the future. The future's been cut off and she's bitter and desperately sad. But they're back in Bethlehem, and it's the beginning of the barley harvest. New things, new times, and much joy and blessing to come next time.